Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below that you can click and actually join the Zoom conversation. You can watch it on YouTube as well, but you might find it to be more interactive inside of Zoom. If you're here in Zoom and this is the first time you've joined us, you're probably in the attendee area. And the difference between the attendees and the panelists is the panelists showed up early. They had good audio, good video, and good internet. They got here. Sometime before 6:40. We open the doors at 6, so you can actually join at 6. I can't promise anything at 6 o'clock. 6 to 6:30, we're having coffee and tea. We're chit-chatting, we're talking. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not as useful. But most of the time it's interesting. And so definitely come in early if you feel like it. And then at 6:30, sometime between 6:30 and 6:40, we're going to distribute the Discord. The Discord link is for Discord. We have almost 600 people in there talking between all these shows about these subjects. And so if you're interested in joining that text conversation, you can do that. But you have to be here at between 6:30 and 6:40. We post the link. It expires at 7. So by the time we get here at 7 o'clock, it's gone. So you have to come back another day for that. Then at 6:40, sometime between 6:40 and 6:45, we will start doing mic checks. So everyone here went through a mic check to prepare for this little Q&A. Once we start the mic checks, you don't need to raise your hand. And if you're interested in joining the panel, by the way, you raise your Zoom hand to join before 6:40. But you don't need to raise your hand after that because we're closed. The panel is closed to the number of people we have here. So anyway, so that's kind of how you enter it. At 7 o'clock, pretty close to the top of the hour, exactly, we will start this little part of the program, which is 7 to 8 is just Q&A. It's open Q&A, so our recommendation is that you ask questions early. And then also vote on those questions to move them up. We'll spend a little bit more time on the questions at the front of the hour than we do at the end of the hour. We generally get to almost all the questions, if not all of them, but we answer them progressively faster depending on how much time we have left. So that first hour is open Q&A. Then the second hour is something that we think is important. So we want to spend a little bit more time on it, and so we will we'll work through that. And so this time, for instance, today we're going to spend. Yesterday we spent a little more time on education. Today we're spending a little bit more time on audio. It's still open Q&A. There's not a special speaker, but we're experimenting with the idea of just having audio questions for an hour. So we'll do that from 8 to 9. That'll be the second hour. Tomorrow we've got Chris Summers is going to be talking about camera support. We had promised this last week, but I forgot that we had more lenses to cover. So we're going to talk about camera support and safety. So remote heads, camera rigging, tricky rigs, vehicles, safety, that type of thing, which is very important. On Thursday, we've got Phil Hodgetts, who is the founder and the president of Lumberjack Systems. He's going to talk about basically getting field data, getting all the data you need when you're in the field for documentaries or reality shows or films so that your whole post-production works. And so he's going to be here in the second hour. On Thursday, we've got, I'm sorry, that is Thursday. Wednesday is Chris, Thursday is Phil. And we also, on second Thursday, the third hour, we have Oliver Breidenbach. He's going to be talking about Mimo Live. Then on Friday, we have Steve Wright, who is the author of Digital Compositing for Film and Video. And he's going to talk about green screen. Steve taught me about green screen. So 20 years ago. So we're kind of, he does a lot of training in this area. And I think it's going to be a great talk about green screen if you're interested in really understanding the process. And so that'll be on Friday in the second hour. And then Saturday, we normally have a long day. It's the 4th of July in the United States. And so we're going to still do the Q&A, 2 hours of Q&A on Saturday and Sunday, but we're not going to have the long day this week because of that. So that's kind of what we have coming up. Again, if you have questions, ask the questions down there. Our request for the questions is keep them short, 5 lines. Only ask 1 question per post, and don't put comments in there. We'll just dismiss them. We don't, that's not the place for comments is the chat room, and there's a chat room there, so you can continue to talk amongst yourselves. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Chris, what do we got?
Good morning, Alex. First question is from Chris S. And during the pre-show, George had mentioned something about putting vMix in AWS. And Chris would like to know about George's install.
We've had, there's a couple of us doing it. I mean, a couple of people doing it here. George, did you have it successfully in there? And Chad and Jeff and some of the other folks have been, I don't know if they're here today, but they've typically jumped into it and done a lot of work in that area. But I think George is getting started on it. How's it going, George?
It's going pretty good. I just got the install done late last night. Chad and Jeff pretty much gave me some good tips on getting it done. I'm right at the beginning of it, but I'm excited about it. Obviously, it gives me an opportunity to really dig into vMix until I get a machine on the inside. So it's some serious cloud workflows in there that you could really explore. So I'm excited about it.
And we're going to have Jeff back to talk more about cloud production. And we might dedicate one. We're on Saturdays, except for this Saturday. We generally have some. Leland Best has been talking about vMix. What we might do is do one of those Saturdays or even an additional hour talking just about vMix in AWS, since there's enough of us trying to figure it out that it might be worth having a whole hour just talking through all the bits and pieces of what that actually takes. So we'll put that on the list, or someone should put that in the second hour or something in the requests in Discord, and we'll make sure it works. Go ahead, Paul.
Just wanted to mention that I'm also going to do the same in Microsoft Azure. So I will document.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. So I think that what I'd like to do is make that all 1 hour rather than 2 different hours. And so, Paul, when do you think you're doing that in Azure?
Probably towards the end of this week, I'll go with it.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe the following week we'll take a look at being able to make that something that we include. We'll just talk about cloud in general, maybe comparing and contrasting AWS and Azure. Beju?
Yeah, I've been doing it in Paperspace for about a few weeks now, and it's really easier. It's an easier way to do it than AWS. Basically, it's you get the parsec install, and it's pretty easy. You just need to make sure you get the public IP for it. Otherwise, vMix doesn't authenticate.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, we're going to definitely spend a whole hour on this, because it's I think a lot of people in our group are trying to figure it out. So we'll come back to that. All right. Next question.
That's some real George Jetson stuff. Jason Fazornik says, a friend of mine is an opera singer who recently purchased a Blue Yeti USB mic to do Zoom recordings with his opera company. During recordings, he has discovered that if he holds a really long note, up to like 10 seconds sometimes, the audio will drop out. What could be causing this issue, and what are some potential solutions?
Did he say he was going into Zoom?
He did say into Zoom.
So here's the problem with, even with original audio, and even with turning everything off, most of these apps, if they get something that's very constant, they'll think that it's actually ambient noise and get rid of it. And we've seen this with bars and tone. We've seen it with, I've never seen it with someone actually singing a note, but we've definitely seen it with bars and tone and other things where it'll go for a certain amount of time and then turn off. So I think that what's happening is the ambient, cutout. It's saying that is a noise that's always here, and you've somehow succeeded in keeping that note long enough where it thinks it's part of the background, and it just pulls it out. So I think that if you're recording, you probably want to find another way to record it. I wouldn't record it into Zoom in that area. And if you're singing into Zoom, if you have original audio on, make sure that all your ambient removal that's also in that same dialog box is turned off. But if that's not working, I don't know if there's a way around it, because this is something that that should do it. Turning original audio on and turning off your ambient noise suppression should work. That should get you what you need. If they're turned off in your audio settings and original audio is turned on, it shouldn't do this. But if it's doing it, I'm guessing that's probably the reason. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'd like to add room control. If you got a very bouncy room, maybe they're seeing a lot of feedback coming from there. So if you have a dead room or in a sound box, you can give that a try and see what happens.
Yeah, and there's the suppressed persistent background noise. So yeah, echo cancellation, I don't think you can turn off. You can make it either auto or aggressive, and that may be but I think that suppressed persistent background noise and intermittent, if you click on those, you'll see that those can be turned off. And so I think that's probably what you're trying to do. But we've seen this for as long as these platforms have existed, is that if you give them the same tone for a long enough period of time, they will cut you out.
Props to the singer, though, holding a note.
I know, holding a note long enough for it.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Vittoria Ray says, somebody mentioned a book about building a home studio on office hours. Leyland something. Would you mind repeating that name? If anybody knows what that is.
I think Leland has his own book that he's put out on kind of building that up, but I don't know what the name of it is. Maybe we'll put that into the links. Or maybe someone can put it in the chat if they know it.
He has an ebook. He has an ebook.
BTBlive.com. He's got
BeLive.com.
it.
Yeah. So,
BCP Live. Yeah.
okay, we'll put that in the chat. Next question.
Next question. Beth Marshall says, I'm an actor building a studio for recording video demo tapes for casting directors. Best camera for 1080p, close-up quality, using a MacBook Pro for editing.
Best camera is that's a complicated question here. So, you can, I think that, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think that, I know almost nothing, but I would imagine that a casting director is really looking past all the technology.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Everyone tries to look past that technology, but I will say from someone who plays really hard, if you send something that is significantly better than everyone else, nobody gets over it. Like nobody gets over really well shot, like well lit. It doesn't mean that you have to be dramatically lit or whatever. It's a common thing that I use a lot to get work is to overplay everybody, on presentation, and so, and that, you may be able to get away with a webcam and a good stream deck or stream cam or a 1080p, 920. But if you're looking for best camera, the thing that I would probably look at is something like a Blackmagic Studio, where it's going to be $1,500. So, you got to decide whether that's, when you're saying best camera under $300 or $600, we can talk about what that is, but probably the best camera that's easy to set up, that you can see and that you can run it, and then that's going to shoot a relatively good image would probably be that camera, as far as being able to swap lenses and do the things that you want to do, and then good lighting and good audio. But I think that, it's, again, in this moment, you actually have the opportunity to outplay everybody around you, with a little bit of extra work. So it just depends on what your budget is. When you say best camera, I don't know what that means.
She does say best camera for 1080p close-up quality. I think she's probably looking for a nice bus shot.
iPhone.
But yeah, I mean, if you're recording, I mean, the iPhone will be nice and easy to run. But if you're trying to, you could use an iPhone to do it, and just put it up there, and you'll get 1080p quality. Again, if you're trying to have more control over it and more color and everything else, and a shorter depth of field and all the things that might make it a little bit better. And again, I think that regardless of whether directors are trying to look past it, you don't want to go too far, but I think that you can often get an unfair advantage by playing a little harder than everyone else around you. Bill, then Roscoe, then Yeshai, 15 seconds each.
Yeah, I won't even take that much. This is, I think, becoming a bigger and bigger thing. There's so many work from home people who are trying to do studios in their houses that I almost think that doing a specific second hour on small, medium, and large installation for people who are trying to do this would be a really good subject.
Yeah, and you would do inside of our Discord, if you're in that, Beth, you might want to look at the, I mean, they're all ranges, but there's folks that say share your setup, and you'll see a lot of different setups that people have, and you can go in, definitely ask questions about that there as well as here. But we can, talk through lighting and audio, and again, most people, you would think, there are a lot of people that don't think that our video quality matters, but it does. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, you said micro studio, and I definitely, for a casting office, I'd say pocket.
Well, what I said, I think, was studio, not micro studio. I would get the studio, but you could get the 4K. I would get the studio camera because it's got a big screen and you can kind of set it all up. But you're right that at the same price, the Pocket Cinema is probably a good one. You can move it around a lot more. It's going to be able to record locally and that type of thing. It's about the same price.
The menu system alone makes it worth it.
You're right. So I will cede to Roscoe's thing, but it's a great camera. You're going to use it all the time. You can use it for a lot of different things, and it's going to give you a lot of control over color. And there's a lot of people here when you get it that have one that can help you. So there's a lot of us here to do that. Shy, go ahead, and then we'll
invest in a high quality lens and lighting. I think will be the first priority. And the camera. Well, if the lens is good,
I'll disagree a little bit on that, just because you can get an SLR camera and you'll be struggling with it a lot. If you get an SLR camera that tries to do the same thing that a video camera does, you'll struggle a lot to make that work. All right, next question.
Audio.
Yeah, audio is important. Absolutely. Next question.
Next question. Daniel Goldstein says, can you suggest an economical loudness leveling tool on the master output of a live mix with various presenters and background music?
Bill.
Not on a live mix, but Levelator is back. I'm astonished at that. This tool that a lot of us used for decades, that is a absolute one-trick pony. All it does is maximize levels, and we loved it for years. But they brought it back.
Yeah, but it's not live. It's great that it's there, but it's not live. Go ahead, Victor.
Yes, I'm going to recommend something from a company called Blue Cat Audio. It's economical. It's absolutely free. It is a gain suite, and you will have to read the documentation to see if you can do exactly what you need. Yes, you can do it live as long as you're doing it with something like Audio Hijack or something else that will host the VST or other type of AU plugin. So be cautious, but do read the documentation because it's not a magic pill, but it's a very good free suite of gain structure type stuff. So there you go.
And Brian can jump in. I mean, I think the one thing that I would say is the traditional tools for this are typically a mixture of auto mixing, Dugan auto mixing, and compression. So you kind of push everything together and you have an auto mix to get between folks, and a skilled operator to, as Jeff put up his hands, and I'm assuming, Jeff, that's what you're hands on
faders.
Yeah, hands-on faders, but to do some fine stuff. But the auto mixing and compression will reduce the amount of fader work that you have to do to make that work. Brian, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, not really. It's a lot of times people are looking for, I just send anything into this and it all spits out one level, and you can have that, and it will sound really, really bad. But it'll all be one level of really bad. No, I mean, a skilled operator balancing those things, multi-stage compression. I could go on and on and on. But I will say Victor's recommendation as far as a suite of plugins that you can get very economically and at least start down the road of learning how to do that is a great suggestion.
Next question.
Next question is Karen Foote. Is there a service similar to Zencaster that does a double-ended local recording of both audio and video?
For some reason, I think that doesn't Ecamm have a tool that does double ending for video? I think you can definitely have, if everybody has Ecamm, I think there's a Skype tool that everybody can run it and you get video back on double end. That's the only one that I know of. I think that we've used it in the past where it'll grab their own video, but we had, and I don't remember which service, which part of Ecamm it was, but everybody had one, and then everyone hits record and they talk to each other over it, and then they get that record. Go ahead, Chris.
In the chat, Jason Fitzgerald is saying that Zencaster has video recording in private beta testing right now. Ooh.
So soon it'll be Zencaster. So, but not quite yet. All right, next question. And we're getting a lot of the audio questions into the general ones. So we're going to skip to regular questions. Let's switch to non-audio questions until the second hour, unless we run out of the ones that we have. So let's just go to the other questions since we're doing audio all in the next hour.
Kathy Sanders says, "Why is it that we can't see who's talking?"
I don't know. I would think that you can see who's talking. Mickey, are people?
I think she was talking about during the mic checks.
I wonder if she's on a mobile device, because on a mobile device it doesn't if it's on gallery view, it doesn't automatically move around the.
Mickey wasn't switching in the first hour, and that's when she asked the question
at 6:30. Yeah,
right. Yeah, it might have been. Sorry about that. You should be seeing it now. You should see whoever's talking now. Next question.
Rob Collins says, "What's a decent pair of cheap desk?" Another audio question. Okay.
We're just going to skip through. We'll come back to them and deal with them. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go to the other ones first, because since we're talking for an hour about audio next.
Stephen O'Brien says, the Canon Beta software for the webcams is only available in the US. Has anyone on the panel any workarounds for EMEA?
Is anyone in EMEA using it? Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, you can just download it off the website. It's basically just TOCs. You can use it anywhere else. I'm using it here. It works.
There you go. Solved. Just download it. We'll put the link. Can someone put the Canon link into the chat, and then we'll make sure that you know exactly where to go for that. It might be obscured in the EMEA website, but we'll put the direct link into that so you can get to it. Next question.
Are we sure that it's not restricted by IP? Might they need a VPN to get it?
But Beju's not using. Beju,
Well,
were you using a VPN to
were
get
you
it?
using a VPN, or did you just get it directly?
Nah, I just got it straight off it, basically.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Next question.
Dear Collective Mind Trust, you guys have discussed this before, but I'd like thoughts on how teachers in the future could use a combination of avatars with remote students using VR to get an immersive experience.
So my opinion about that, I think Colin actually might agree with me on this, is that there are many other things that we need to solve before that happens. So that is, I will argue that is 5 to 10 years away from being useful. And what we're seeing is a bunch of people trying to sell that to us right now. And because, it's virtual. Let's go into a virtual world. And we all saw Ready Player One, and we all think that that's next and everything else. And I do think that we're going to see things progressively move that direction, and it may be really interesting in the future. But right now, we don't even have a way to properly interact or manage, an ongoing conversation between people. So I think that, and I do think that there's going to be a huge drop off until our digital tools really represent us more effectively. Taking away everybody's, facial, just, their all their expression and how they're looking at it and all those things, and eye contact, the virtual eye contact or close to it. I don't think that most of I see a lot of people playing with the whiz bang tools and being excited about them. I don't see this as and there's companies like Facebook spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that right now. So I'm not saying that it isn't going to happen someday. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And I think that we had a whole discussion on Monday about that. And I think that there's other problems right now, like teachers being challenged just to create content, because I think flipping the classroom will make more of a difference than anything else that they can possibly do. And, we're going to get distracted by all this, virtual mumbo jumbo of, avatars and everything else. And I think that's as someone who lives on the front edge of a lot of this stuff, I think that's a distraction. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah. So this is the one topic on which I second everything that Alex just said. Rarely happens.
You have to write it down because it only happens like once.
It only happens in this one topic. But to add to this, this goes back to the discussion of how augmented reality is inherently more useful than virtual reality, and which is true, but is also an indicator that, or is indicative of augmented reality being less complex to implement. That is, you have to implement a smaller view into the data that you're presenting rather than build a whole virtual world. I can see a scenario where you might use augmented reality to provide data about an object being viewed. We're discussing, geothermal energy. We're looking at a geothermal vent, and it provides temperature data or something like that. Augmented reality is going to be much more valuable than virtual reality in this context for quite some time. But that said, it's not ready either. So
it's coming, and it's all coming. And the thing is that I think that there are opportunities that I'm excited about with VR that deal with, like, what if you went you wanted to talk about a historical event and you could experience it. Everyone could put on goggles and they could see it all around them, and the teacher could be sitting there talking about it, and you could see the Gettysburg, Pickett's charge on Gettysburg, or you could see, whatever those things are, and really experience them. I think that's going to be a whole new visceral experience that people get from VR. That is a long way away from being, working well. And so I think that is the issue, is that, and I feel like I see this right now because of COVID and everything else. There's a whole bunch of people trying to raise money on it at the moment. This is their next shot at that. And I think that it's not probably, again, I think it's going to be a big deal at some point, but I agree with Colin that AR is going to be a much bigger deal within the next year or two. And because you can pop objects you can be in Pages document, or a Keynote document, and tap on something, have it pop, pull up your thing and see it in your living room. Could be done now. Like that's something that could be very visceral. But I think we have so many interaction problems right now for teachers and students that I think that's the first challenge to take on, over the next year or two. Anyway, next question.
Greg Yote says, is the best way to capture live video from a Nikon DSLR digitizing the HDMI? And if so, which HDMI digitizer should I use?
I'm trying to see that question. I don't know where that showed up. It's way down. Oh, okay. The most stable one is still Web Presenter. The Blackmagic Web Presenter is still the most stable. Then I would say after that, it'd probably be the Magewell. And then after that, it would be everything else. As far as getting those things in. The one that we're constantly chasing things that won't see as Skype and all these other folks update their things break. The only thing that doesn't break, or we haven't seen break yet, is the Blackmagic Web Presenter. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Beju, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I read that as using going into a recorder, such as a Video Assist or a Atmos or something like that.
No, it's actually saying capturing live video.
Yeah, that one's not as we're not sure. I'm assuming Roscoe reads it one way, I read another. Beju, what did you have any?
Yeah, I was actually reading it more like basically be able to use it as a webcam. So there is a software right now, Cascable Pro webcam beta software, which supports Canon and Nikon. So he can try it. They've got a free demo. He can try it out. If he can, that might work for him. Okay.
Go ahead, Bill. 15 seconds.
And just really quickly, I've been struggling with that because I have a bunch of webcams lying around and I wanted to use them with the ATEM, and it just doesn't see any of them. So, and webcam output doesn't work well with HDMI inputs.
Next question.
Chris Barnett says, is it possible to trick the 5D Mark III to not auto power off so I can record its clean HDMI feed for longer than a few minutes? I've disabled the auto off, but the thing still shuts off.
Someone else can jump in, but I'm pretty sure that that's a safety feature for your sensor. So like the sensor's heating up. It doesn't want to overheat, causing errata and possibly permanent damage to the sensor. I mean, I think that when it's doing it only in a couple minutes, now if it does it at 30 minutes, that is a tax issue in the EU. That's why it shuts off at 30 minutes. But okay, some of the DSLRs will shut off after 7 or 8 minutes. That's not a tax issue. We're protecting the sensor, from, it's not a sensor built for video. And so it doesn't want to stay on. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? But I think those are the two. You have two different things that are the short, which is why I don't use DSLRs for video cameras. I'm just saying, like it's why you just get a video camera for a video camera. Chris,
is that tax thing still a deal?
I think it is.
That was the weirdest.
Ahead, Bill.
It was how they got around it being a video camera, which is tariffed differently than a still camera. Mm-hmm. So it was a limitation, as I recall from the reading at the time, of that. And I don't know if they've ever changed those laws. So, and some people were saying if you put the power supply in, if you shore power your camera, some cameras don't do that shut off. So try that maybe.
Paul, and then Jeffrey, and then Roscoe. Real quick though.
I'm using a Sony DSLR, and it works fine. And the problem I had before, I was pairing it with USB, and it was shut off because the battery died. And so what I did is I got a dummy battery, and that's now in there, and it's running from mains power and doesn't shut off at all now.
And the note is, I think that the A7 series and the GH series, the Panasonic GH and the Sony A7 are probably the most video-like SLRs in my opinion. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I agree. The battery is a good trick. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the other thing is, you probably will just have to do a firmware hack or something like that. Maybe even like a magic lantern. I don't know if there's one for that type of camera though.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Jeffrey just took it. I was just going to say all Canon users should at least investigate Magic Lantern.
Yep, that's kind of what the hack we've all been using for a long time. Next question.
Our own Beju says, any tips for improving throughput to RTMP destinations when that is poor, while bandwidth is otherwise okay?
Beji, what are you streaming from and to?
Yeah, I'm streaming. I tried streaming from OBS as well as from Mimo Live. The issue seems to be that there's some latency in the connection somewhere on the network, because I'm getting 50 up and down otherwise, but when I try to stream, I'm barely getting 1 meg up. If I try to go faster, then my frame rate really drops a lot. So if I try to maintain a constant frame rate, about 1.5 megs. I think it's something to do with how our target is basically AWS EC2 instance in the US, basically using Boxcaster.
Go ahead.
But I'm having the same issue with YouTube as well.
Are you certain there's no throttling going on from your ISP?
They claim it's not there. It's a leased line, but I'm following up with them. But so I'm doing a workaround right now on it, but I want to see if there's any suggestions on this as well.
Yep, Colin.
So leased line, I was going to say check the jitter, because actual bandwidth as stated is independent of jitter. But for a leased line, I would expect the jitter would be quite low. Most of these targets, and I imagine Alex would have more input on this than I, including in the case of YouTube, you certainly can change the buffering that they expect. They'll have a minimum buffer that they'll set up, which will will increase the delay, the perceived delay. You can reduce that buffer to near real time and various other settings. They have a number of fixed settings you can choose in that regard that should improve the latency there.
It won't affect YouTube's ingest to change to go from low latency, ultra low latency, or regular. That's only affecting the delivery to the user, so that the user has a slower connection or unstable connection. Yeah. Perceived, but it's not affecting the Beju's problem. And we've had this problem with YouTube specifically, is that if there's too much latency back and forth because of the way RTMP works, it's still expecting some return packet. It's some return communication.
That's
doesn't see that
your problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if it doesn't see that, it keeps on waiting. It keeps on stalling, waiting to get, did you actually get that? Now, one thing to look at if you're going to AWS, the reason I asked where you're going, once you're going into AWS and you're not going straight into the ingest, you might want to research SRT and Zixi. These things are designed to just power through all of this, and so, SRT is going to be one open, one Zixi. You should be able to put a Zixi wrapper onto your PC. You're going to basically stream it through that, wrap it as Zixi, and it just kind of ignores everything. It just goes, I'm just going to get all my, if the world started using Zixi, we would probably shut the internet down, because it just ignores all the rules of engagement and just says, I am going to get all my bits from one side to the other, whether you like it or not, and so you may have a slightly higher buffer, slightly higher latency into the ingest, because what it's doing is it's going back and grabbing all the packets that it didn't see, coming through. But I think that, SRT is in my opinion, about 90% as effective as Zixi, and both of them should be available for ingest into the AWS. So I would take a...
That's what actually I'm testing right now. Basically, I'm sending SRT up to my vMix instance in the cloud, and then streaming to RTMP from there to the server, basically.
Yep.
And it seems to be working, so I'm doing more testing on it, right?
Yeah, but that's usually what when we're having RTMP problems, we usually switch to Zixi. I don't have as much experience with SRT, but I'm testing SRT as well. But our go-to for the last decade has been Zixi. We just lean back into Zixi every time we are getting RTMP solutions, and find a place that's safe to get it to. And that's why, for instance, we're in India, we'll be using for another project, using those links. Is so that we just plug the internet in.
That's why we need. That's why we need your basically AWS primer soon, so we can actually see how AWS media works, to see how.
I'll talk to them.
AWS
we'll schedule that. We'll schedule that in the next 2 weeks. Within the next week or the week after, we'll get the guys in.
Right. There was one other thing. Sorry. Basically, the other thing you want to check is packet loss to the edge of your provider's network, because that's the only thing your SLA is going to cover. For a leased line, they'll provide a maximum packet loss beyond which they'll consider the network to be broken, and they'll guarantee that minimum packet loss. Probably.
Yeah, packet loss is not really that high, but jitter probably is high, because we're using a microwave link for the last leg, so that's probably adding extra jitter.
That'll do it.
All right, next question.
I just see a bunch of people yelling the alphabet at each other back and forth. I have no idea what any of that meant. Elaine says, it's like elemental P, X, Y, L, G. FQ. Slides in a webinar. I use, Elaine says, slides in a webinar. I use Keynote Live and using screen share. I display a browser window of the slide, all of this with Mimo Live. I want to be able to minimize the slides while I'm speaking and still show the slides when needed. Any better way? Keynote is run from an iPad.
Well, I mean, if you're, I guess I'm a little, like, I'm looking at this, Elaine, and I guess my, my question, hold on. I'm gonna hold on. Oh, he's gone. Oh, he's, yeah. Oh, there he goes. I'm bringing him in. I'm breaking rank here. Hold on. Because I just know that he didn't make the test, but we're going to let him in just so he can answer the question, because I'm interested in this. I can't quite figure it out. He's getting a mulligan, but don't. It's not a pattern. Don't start doing this.
No, I'm sorry. It's just that I was in a meeting, and this is an issue that came in our training yesterday.
So explain what you're trying to do, because I don't quite understand it.
So what we're doing is we're using Mimo Live, so that's helping a little bit. So Mimo Live is what's going out to Zoom, and we have one other window that's a small window in the corner with the slide in it, and then when they want, they switch over to the big slide. But they find that a little bit too difficult to do. So I'd wonder, one of the issues with either PowerPoint or Mimo Live, when you do a presentation, it takes your whole screen. So as a one-person presenter, they don't see anymore what's happening on the other end. Now, there's different ways. You can have an iPad connecting to the show so you can see what the people are seeing. Or is there a way to get PowerPoint or Keynote to show without taking over the whole screen?
Well, once you lose a bunch of controls if you're doing it over Zoom. Once you go, when you pop it and it goes full screen, you can usually you should be able to reset that as your view of that, when you're, so that it can go into a smaller area. But it is a real problem. I've had this problem with presentations. I'm actually thinking of a whole product related to it because it's just foobar at the moment. Bill, and then Mike.
Yeah, I think part of the problem might be the fact that you're running it off of an iPad, because when you run Keynote off of a computer, and especially if there's a second screen detected, because most of these are modal like that, if there's no second screen, it runs in monoscreen mode. If you have a second screen, you can usually pump out clean slides to that second screen. So you may want to just try running it off a laptop instead of the iPad.
Go ahead.
Well, I've got 3 screens. So I've got one that's next to that's the one that people view. That's what's going out. I've got my main screen, and I've got another one. The presentation is actually going there, and I'm capturing that screen. There's no way, though, when you go into your presentation, your screen setup for organizing your screens, there is no way to make Keynote not use one of them. It's going to use all 3 of them that you have, and if you got 4, it's going to use all 4. It's going to allow you to put just the timer on one, and the Keynote on the other one, and the presenter notes on the other one. It does not leave you a screen empty.
And I know that this is not going to solve the problem. How many of these stations do you have that you're trying to use? Is it every teacher, or is it 1 or 2 stations, or what?
We got about 20 of the teachers that are having that issue, and they do not want to buy something like Mimo Live, and OBS doesn't work on the Mac very well for that. So with Mimo Live, it's resolved. There's no problem at all, because now you can control all your screens, and you just bring them in as different sources. No problem at all.
Okay, so that works. Because I was going to say, the other thing is on the other side of that is also, I mean, this is why I recommend people buy ATEM Minis. For their desk, is because now you have random access to all of the things that you want, and you just push buttons and they just change, and it does require some slide design changes, which means you can't put a lot of text on it, which is a good thing. It's a good thing, so like, oh, now you have a technical reason. Oh, because of Zoom, you just have to have, 10 words on there instead of 200.
At the most.
And we can finally find our way back to a good space. So I think that Mimo, so it's what you're trying to do is solve this without Mimo Live. And what I would say is, without Mimo Live or without a ATEM Mini, you're going to have a lot of problems, because they're just not built for that right now. And they're trying to make it easy for everyone to use. And without those hacks, it becomes more difficult. Go ahead, Mickey, and then we're going to go into speed round here soon. Yep, absolutely.
If you're saying that Mimo Live solves the problem, then how about OBS?
Doesn't work.
OBS does not work with Zoom on a Mac. And most of my teachers, probably 40% of my teachers are on Mac.
On Catalina.
I run it on Mac fine.
Really?
I'm running it
Running
on
it right
Mac
now.
fine.
As a virtual camera. Okay, well, talk to me because I need to figure it out.
Do you need? Is there a separate
solution? Is what John's doing there.
You have to put the NDI tools on, right? You have to install NDI tools. So that's what they're missing, Elaine, is that they need to install the NDI tools and then the NDI virtual camera, and then you're outputting OBS to NDI, and then the NDI virtual camera will be seen by Zoom.
It's a different source. Okay, I'll try that out. Thank you.
Yep, Mike, real quick, 15 seconds.
Just, if Mimo Live's out of the question, I can't answer this, but you can run a web browser. You can run a web browser in Mimo Live, so use Keystone on the web, right?
Right.
That's he's
trying. They're trying to work around that. That's the issue. All right. Next question.
Jonas Dautel says, "What do you think of Nimble Streamer?" Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
And I don't think any of us think anything of Nimble Streamer because I'm not familiar with it. So we'll have to. We get stumped. We don't get stumped very often, but no one's used it. All right, we're gonna move on.
It's very hard skipping over the audio related.
I know.
Do you have?
Mitchell's. We got A. Mitchell's asked one about metadata.
I was gonna save that as a.
No. Just use it now.
I was gonna do it as a segue at the end of this hour. So A. Mitchell's, collecting metadata for acquisition for the documentaries come Thursday.
Thursday is going to be the day that we're experts in some things, but man, the expert is coming on Thursday. Thursday second hour is going to be what you want to.
Philip is otherworldly when it comes to metadata.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question.
Tim McKean says, "Can you talk more about NDI Tools?"
I don't think we have time to talk like in great detail about NDI Tools, but there's an NDI tool set that you can download for Mac and PC, and maybe even does it run on Linux or Unix? But anyway, but Mac and PC, you can download. You can go up and get NDI tools. You can download them. There's a whole suite of them, and it's going to allow you to see NDI sources. You have a virtual camera that can be seen by Zoom and other devices, and so those are all things that, except for the new Skype. Not that I'm bitter. The new Skype is a dumpster fire. So Skype in general, we're depreciating Skype permanently by the end of the summer. I'll never use it again. Like just never. Anyway, so the NDI tools, we can probably have a whole discussion on it. There's a lot of discussion about it in Discord, but it's the NDI tools are something you can download. Where do you get those? Are those on New Tech site? Oh, there they are. NDI tools. That's what you're looking for.
You just say it and it pops up in your face.
Voila. Anyway, so download those. You'll start to see a bunch of things, ask things on Discord. If they don't make sense, come back up and ask more questions. All right, next question.
Tim McKean says, "Do you have recommendations for excellent examples of teacher-created video on YouTube? Something teachers can use as a model to work toward?"
So I have to look at what he's put up recently. One of the teachers that's really pushing the outer envelope of this in the K through 12 area specifically is Tony Farley in San Leandro High School. Tony Farley has built a multi-million-dollar facility by just being good at it. like just keeps on working on it. I don't know if he's in the group or not. We should have him talk about but he has just raised, constantly been, raising money and being effective for a decade. And I think that we should bring him on to talk about some of those things because he's got all the students working on it. Go ahead, Roscoe. Do you have other suggestions there?
Yeah, TED Ed. TED Ed is really good.
Okay, TED Ed. Yeah. So, but I think that again, what I think is nuts that I'm just going to say, and I'll probably say it all summer, is that we're spending the whole summer trying to figure out whether we're going physical or whether we're going virtual when we actually have a summer that we could train all the teachers to do something virtual well, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to hem and haw back and forth and then have a bunch of teachers that aren't ready in the fall again. All right, next question.
Ernie Kapenki, sorry, Ernie. Does Blackmagic Web Presenter plus Teranex Mini Start Panel equal an ATEM Mini, or are there benefits to have the separate components?
I think that the real benefit of the web presenter is they're not equal. You have more inputs, you have keys, you have all kinds of other stuff with the ATEM Mini that you won't have with the web presenter. The web presenter has SDI, which you won't have with the Mini. The web presenter shows up more consistently than the Mini on computers. So I have a couple computers that my ATEM Mini will not show up on, that my web presenter shows up all the time. And that I think has to do with the 720p versus 1080p camera, output. So I think that overall, you just have to decide if you have a whole production pipeline in front of or SDI cameras in front of the web presenter is the right solution. If you are building something that you want to switch, you might want to add some lower thirds or graphics, that type of thing. Then you can switch. The web presenter will let you switch between the HDMI and the SDI source. So you can have a camera, switch to your computer, switch back to the camera, switch to your computer. So that's a simpler version. But oddly enough, the web presenter costs more than the Mini. so that you're paying. Once you get down that path, you just have to decide whether you need SDI. I think that's the big SDI and compactness. It can be rack mounted is also a value for some people. Anybody else? All right, next question.
I'm sorry again, I still have like 9 of them here, and I think they're all audio related.
Well, then let's switch to we're just going to switch early then. If all we got is audio left, let's move to audio.
Whoa. I don't know if I can handle that. Great Goat says, when trying to have great audio, what levels do you want to have in the recording? I know everyone here is looking for -20 LUFS. Should that be what I target for digital recording level as well?
Mickey?
Just want to ask, cut YouTube now? Do we say bye-bye to YouTube if we're switching early?
We'll just keep going till the top of the hour. We're just taking these questions. Yeah, go ahead. Jesse, you were about to say something?
Yeah, just maybe just to know that if you ever hit 0 on a digital scale, that's a problem. So your peaks probably want to be at -6 at the max, and then it's just a decision of what type of audio are you recording to figure out where your bottom end is going to be and how much sort of dynamic range you want. So different if you're doing dialogue versus music recording or something like that. But just to know that if you ever hit 0, then you're going to get some digital distortion, which is not removable.
Yeah, and the thing that you're constantly wrestling against, and we'll jump to a bunch of other folks too, is the fact that the cleaner your preamps are, the more headroom you can give yourself without losing. The reason that you want it to be bright when you're recording is because you've got a noise floor that starts somewhere between 40 and 60 dB down for many of these, and really good preamps will give you a lot more room. But that the noise of your system, you don't want what you're trying to record fall into that noise floor. So you're trying to pull it out of that noise floor by getting the right gain. But if you gain too much, as Jesse said, you'll lose it all. So there's kind of that's the wrestling point of what you're doing. Go ahead, Bill, then Mickey.
Yeah, just in the old days, if you came up out of the old system, you pushed things up to the max because there was this soft clipping thing that happened that actually sounded good. And I'm just going to emphasize what was said first. In digital recording, if you go over 255, 250, and it sounds horrible. It just is, the whole signal falls apart and it's unlistenable. So you have to be careful.
The other thing to be careful, the other thing you can do a little bit in there is if you have good limiters, high quality limiters, you can get limiters in there at -3 or whatever that are relatively aggressive, a 6x, 6 or 9 or whatever they're really going to chop that off as it hits, and it's going to get closer to what Bill was talking about before. Now, you will hear it if you constantly are tapping up against it. So it's not something that you want to push up against all the time, but having that as a safety so that you never get all the way over 0 is another way to kind of approach that, to make sure that you're not doing that. So then you're peaking -6 with the knowledge that if someone says something really loud, it's not going to just distort, on the way out. So that's another thing to kind of consider. Mickey, were you going to say something about that? I thought you did.
Yeah. I think it's important to say also to bring up what scale we're talking about. And I think most of us here are talking about digital full scale, wherein 0 is peak. So you do not want to reach 0. If you're talking about analog meters, 0 is equal to negative 20 decibels full scale. And also when we talk about negative 20, we should clarify as well if we're talking about VU, which is sort of an average.
So I have pinned the WLM meter, so I'm trying to visually understand what you're talking about, and I'm watching the green bar at the bottom. Maybe can somebody hold my hand while we're talking, and maybe you could pin the WLM meter and you can do a running commentary on what I'm looking at?
All right, give me a sec. WLM spotlight video. Okay, cool. So yeah, what we see here is the green bar at the bottom is true peak, which is the actual peak of the signal that WLM is seeing. Momentary is sort of an averaged meter, average level over the past 3 seconds.
And getting over that 0 is bad on the true peak. So
yeah,
that's
on
one thing.
Zero bad. Good, got it.
Zero is very bad. And Scott, you look so good. You just keep on getting. It just keeps. Look at that guy. So anyway, so it's getting better. All right. So props to Sky for Sky's come a long way. We watched his progression, in this whole process. So anyway, Victor, go ahead.
Nothing money won't solve.
So I'll just chime in from this perspective of loudness units full scale and what some of the services out there are doing to alter that. And generally speaking, you can get a lot of different variances, but generally speaking, podcast minus 19 LUFS for mono, minus 16 LUFS for stereo. The differences there in 3dB is because of something called Pan's Law. I'll put some links to deal with that. And then if you're talking about music, iTunes minus 16 LUFS for the entire program. So if I'm talking about a song and I'm using that meter, I am playing that song from beginning to end, and the entire song needs to be minus 16 LUFS, opposed to that short-term LUFS you're seeing on that meter, or even the program, which can vary. So it's the full program that we need to be talking about. Just want to make that clarification, because when we're doing mic checks, we're just seeing that temporarily we're all hitting minus 20, which is a good thing because if everyone's doing that. But if you wanted to measure the entire program, you'd take this entire YouTube presentation end to end and see what your actual LUFS score.
Since I saw Chris's eyes glaze over. When you
My apologies. It's just that sometimes I think we need to get a little bit into the weeds because these terms can be very confusing. So I apologize if I made anyone's eyes glaze.
We're going to get into we're going to take confusing terms and then make them more confusing.
What is LUFS?
We need to. We talked about that a little ahead. We're going to talk about meters in another round, and I might even move that up to next week. So we'll talk about possibly like looking at meters and just digging into them. I think that there's. We're gonna have to start doing meters soon, just so we really dig into that as a second hour. Let's keep moving on. Next question.
Stan Chan says, my Zoom Pro client has an option for enable stereo in the audio options. Does that make my audio better, or does it just waste my bandwidth?
It can actually, it just depends on what you're doing. I think that in the Zoom settings, it's an option to allow for it. It doesn't mean that it'll actually do anything to stereo. I think someone has to go to original audio before it's going to start pushing stereo out. So you can put that option in to enable stereo in and enable original audio in the web settings inside of Zoom to allow that to happen. If you're doing music, it's absolutely going to sound better. If you're not doing music, I wouldn't recommend it. And the reason for that is that if people are talking and they have any problem with their pipeline, that they're somehow getting one channel in or the other, you can end up with people only on one side. Ours is set up to stereo. And as a result, every once in a while, someone's playing with their pipeline here and you only hear them in one ear. If I didn't have that, if everyone's talking, that you probably don't need it. And if you're doing general things with folks that are plugging all kinds of things in, you don't have enough time to check it, you may end up with an unusual experience there. Mickey and then Chris?
Yeah, if you're just broadcasting dialogue content, you don't need to stream it out in stereo. You usually just want it pan center. But say like when I play out the outro music at the end, I have that in stereo. But just to show you guys what happens if it's panned like all the way left, this should be coming out only on the left side, and this should be coming out only on the right side right now.
I don't think
I don't hear anything.
I didn't hear it change.
Oh, really?
I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it at all.
It's oh, okay. Sorry, your routing is wrong right now. I'm strictly mono right now.
I didn't notice a difference doing that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Totally forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, what I will say is that just to expand this to when we're doing streaming, if the audio quality is not a priority in the stream, we, in our encoders, copy the left channel to the right channel. So we literally will just, in the encoder, make it mono. And the reason that we do that is because if Brian's doing all the audio, I don't do this. But if I'm working with an external crew, we have had external crews screw up the polarity in one of the channels. And what they will do is when you have stereo going in and it's mono source, and the polarity is off on one of the XLRs going into it, they act as a balanced audio to each other and eliminate them. So when you listen on your phone, it literally eliminates all the audio. And so it sums them. They are in opposite phases or opposite polarity, and then they negate each other on anything on a summed system that goes out like your phone. And so we, as a safety to protect ourselves from being in the middle of that mess, which we have been in, if we work with an external crew, if we don't have complete control over the audio and music is not a primary part of the show, we will copy the left channel to the right channel just so that we don't have to deal with it. We just don't trust external teams. Chris?
I remember now. My question to you was, in your earbud, do you listen to both the left and the right channel summed together?
I'm hearing it summed together.
Okay.
Yep. Next question.
Tim McKean says, what's your favorite solution for recording Zoom sessions with both sides of the audio? I'm not happy with the quality I'm getting from either the cloud recording or the local recording. Best seems to be a local screen recording. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the audio, if you're doing meetings, I think we've established that you can do stems, but they may not be great quality. You're going to generally have like something, depending on whether you're a PC or Mac, like an audio hijack is a perfect example of something that you would use where you pass it through and then you can pass it into something that can record as well as send it to Zoom. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think the real issue here is, I think the quality of the recording is, when you record those stems, it's not bad. It's just a bad source. It's an okay recording of a bad source, which yields something that doesn't sound good.
Well, and with any compression, the problem is that if you don't give it a great source, and there's a little bit of ambient, there's a little bit of echo, there's a little bit of reverb, there's no place to grab onto that to fix it, because you have just the delivery quality rather than headroom that you would get in a pure record, where it's, there's not all the compression and everything else. You can EQ your way out of some things and filter it out of others, but if you have a highly compressed signal, it becomes harder to, you don't have as many handles to grab onto. Go ahead, Bill. But I agree with you, Chris, that a lot of it's just the source audio.
It's an okay recording of a bad sound.
Yeah, because I think they're trying to record both sides of something, and there's an inherent mess in between them trying to push them across the internet. The choir in a box things that succeed, they're all doing ISOs, and somebody's mailing that ISO file from the local recording into a central mixing point where somebody is combining them together. As far as I can see, that's the only way you can absolutely ensure that it's good quality on every one of multiple sources coming in.
Right, and Tim asked about explain stems. So if you're doing meetings in Zoom, you have a setting that's in, like, I don't know where that setting.
It's buried
recording
somewhere.
Settings. Buried in recording settings, you can say record everybody's individual audio. And so you can break that all out into stems. Stems is I'm not going to get into it right now. It's not exactly individual ISOs. It's grouped things that are grouped into, but I'm just using it as a quick term, that you're going to grab the isolated records of each person in Zoom, And that's a setting that is in the record settings, I believe, that will let you do that. It will not work in webinar, but it will work in meetings. Jesse, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, yeah, there's a little internet page application called Clean Feed that people can use to record a double ender if it's just audio. But yeah, it sounded like this question was related to the quality of the inputs and also possibly the processing that Zoom is doing. So, you know, that person might check those out.
Having some type of recording system, whether it's audio hijack part of the pipeline or on a PC, something else, that where you can take your mic and pipe it to something that's recording as well as to Zoom, is a way that you can have that conversation, but then record more pristine content on the other end. Let's go ahead and shut off YouTube, and then we'll keep going. Same thing, more audio questions.